Hi, you've reached a holiday edition of The Signal Watch. Yuletide movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host of Christmas Present, Ryan Steens. Join me and our caroling cadre of co-contributors as we examine Christmassy artifacts of the 20th century, merrily explore the 21st, and try to put it all in North Pole perspective. Stay frosty. We're gonna try to make this work.
Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas, and welcome to the Signal Watch, boys and girls. I am your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is...
Simon Day. Hello, Merry Christmas, everybody. Great to be back.
You're supposed to say Happy Christmas, I believe.
Happy Christmas. What a lovely, lovely Christmas to you.
This is our first Christmas episode of the year. I'm very excited that Simon was getting us going in a timely fashion. It is about mid-November today as we record. I told you that I would tell you beforehand. You said this is my first Christmas movie of the year, and I said it's not mine.
Yeah.
And I will confess, I have watched not one but two Hallmark Christmas movies already this year.
Oh, goodness me. Goodness me.
In my defense,
the blocks there.
Yeah, in my defense, they both starred Erica Durance, who played Lois Lane on Smallville.
You love her.
Yeah, I do. I'm a big fan of Erica Durance. So
I've heard you mention her before.
Yes, and I'll do it again.
Were they memorable, these Hallmark films? Or does it matter?
Well, I mean, the answer is no. And they're not. I think Laura and I may be doing a Hallmark movie, possibly, and we'll talk about what Hallmark movies are for, and they're not to be memorable. I'll put it that way.
Steve, I see. I still need to watch a Hallmark movie with you. Well, I'm kind of like strapped to a chair, like Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange.
Yes. I think that would be an excellent exercise. But we are not doing that today. Today we are doing no. What are we doing, sir?
We're doing so as usual. We're all over the place with our choice of what we're going to do for Christmas. And actually, to be honest, I got a bit of envy because you were saying what you were doing with other people, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put out the big guns. Even if they're not necessarily guns I like, but they're fully loaded. We're doing Home Alone from 1990 and Home Alone Lost in New York from 1992.
Yeah.
Which are monster hits when they came out. I was looking this up, and it's terrifying because Home Alone cost $18 million and made nearly $500 million. And was the second biggest film of the year after Ghost. And then Home Alone 2, a couple of years later, still made a very impressive $3.5 million off of $28 million box office. 28 million budget. And again, was second biggest film of the year, only beaten by Aladdin. So these were huge, and for a while I think Macaulay Culkin was the biggest star for a couple of years in Hollywood.
Yeah. He was just kind of showing up on movie posters and printing money. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually really surprised. I'm sure somebody did, but I'm surprised 20th Century Fox didn't go down on their knees and offer everything for Home Alone 3. I'm surprised we didn't get a Home Alone 3 faster. But I guess everybody involved was like, no, we're not doing that again.
Yeah.
Because this is a franchise that sadly did carry on. I think we're up to about Home Alone 6 unofficially now. And I haven't really bothered reading or watching any of the others. I know hilariously, talking about Malcolm McDowell, he's embarrassing himself in one of them, I think, as one of the villains. But I know they're all pretty bad. I think the last one had a fat English kid, which sounds even worse than Macaulay Culkin, to be honest. I say that as an English person, but yeah, I think it's a franchise that's kind of dropped off faster than Police Academy, really. So,
well, one of the interesting things about it is it's not just that. It's if you go to like Amazon,
same story over and over.
Yeah, and if you go to Amazon Prime, there's tons and tons of knockoffs of like the family went away for the holidays and left their dog, and two people decided to break in. Will Sparky
Gerbils.
the dog save Christmas?
The Gerbil's Home Alone, and it's got to like fend off some terrorists.
Yeah, it's become its own like they'll do knockoffs of Scrooge and they'll do knockoffs of other things.
What would you say Home Alone itself? You showed me last year, or told me last year, and I think you might have done a podcast with somebody for, is it the French film Dial Code Santa Claus?
Yeah, I believe Justin and I did that. Yeah.
Which I ended up kind of buying and watching after you mentioned it. And I think funnily, just as I was doing that, the Alamo showed it, and I believe the Alamo Drafthouse is showing it again this year. I might actually go and try to see it on a big screen, but it's interesting. It's definitely not perfect, but it's a much darker, nastier French version of Home Alone, which actually sued 20th Century Fox for plagiarism, and I think won some kind of settlement.
Yeah, there's 100% parallels, and I'll link to the podcast on the SoundCloud and on the webpage. It's a very dark version of essentially the same idea of a kid in his house on Christmas and someone is breaking in, but then there it goes, skews horror.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't go as far as I hoped it would, but it's got kind of nutter dressed as Santa Claus trying to break into the house, and I think the kid's looking after his grandfather who's got Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. They're kind of like running around the house hiding and setting booby traps and things, and there's a bit of a shock early on where I think the intruder kills the family dog, which you don't expect, and that's kind of a bit nasty.
Yeah, it takes it out of kind of the comedic realm where you kind of think you're sitting and makes you go, oh
yeah,
this is quite dark.
Yeah.
This movie this movie instead I think moves between American schmaltz and comedy, slapstick comedy, and I think it does it pretty well.
It's interesting because it's written by John Hughes, and once you know that, you can kind of see the imprints of National Lampoon's Vacation on it, mm-hmm. and also his own movies, and the movies that actually, because Home Alone 2 was probably his last big hit, because after that, I remember joking at the time, even like 30 years ago, after this he made Baby's Day Out and Dennis the Menace, and I was like, he's going to end up with a film about a placenta. Because he was kind of getting younger and younger, but none of those were particularly big hits. I think Home Alone 1 and 2 were his last big hits, but you can kind of tell definitely his voice. You can kind of hear his voice, especially in some scenes. Kind of definitely echoes back to like Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink even.
Yeah, it's between he and his fingerprints on it, and if you know any of the Christopher Columbus oeuvre, it definitely has his kind of pre-packaged kind of Coca-Cola effervescent sort of like vibe to the movie.
Very American, very like, optimistic. Let's go for it. Let's go for the prize kind of thing.
Yeah. So when did you see it in the theater when it came out?
So it's funny, until last night, I think I'd actually deluded myself that I had. And then I suddenly, like an old core memory, wormed itself up and said, no, you didn't. And I think what happened was I actually bought the video of the first one for my brother, who was 8 at the time. I was 16 when this came out. So I was a bit too old for it to care, but he was 8. So he absolutely thought it was the best thing ever. And then I took him to see the second one at the theater.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's the real version. Because for ages, I was like, I saw the first one at the theater, and then I bought the second one on video. And I'm like, no, actually, I think it was the other way around. I think I actually kind of poo-pooed the first one. And then when it became such a big hit, I bought him the video, which interestingly, I think it was one of the first films to do sell-through at the same time as rental. So it wasn't a big rental hit, but it sold tons on sell-through.
That's interesting. So there was John Hughes made a lot of money on this then.
I mean, everybody made a ton of money,
I
think. Although, interestingly, I think Macaulay Culkin in the first film, he got paid like $100,000. And the second film, he got paid $5 million plus 5% of the box office. So he must have got, 30, 40 million?
Yeah, well, they were dumb to not lock him down with a contract for sequels on the first movie.
So yeah, I'm sure that's another reason why we didn't really get a Home Alone 3 with the same cast and crew. But yeah, speaking of which, so we obviously Macaulay Culkin is Kevin. We've got Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern as Harry and Marv. And then as the parents, we've got John Hurd from Cat People and Catherine O'Hara from various Tim Burtons. And they're the main players, really.
Yeah. It's a pretty limited cast. I mean, they manage the kind of minor characters who are in it very, very well. I saw this in the theater, the first one when it came out. I was 15, and I did not care for it.
No.
I was the wrong age. Yeah. I didn't care about kids. I thought it was incredibly violent for a Christmas movie. And second
one's worse though. Second one's worse, I think.
Well, yeah, and I'll get to that for sure, because I never saw the second one because I didn't like the first one. So why would I go see the second one? And it was one of these things of everyone was going to see this movie. I had this budding interest in film and was like, I should go see what the people are seeing. Yeah. And I remember being packed into this theater, like dead center of the theater with whoever I saw it with, like elbow to elbow with a bunch of kids in parkas or whatever. And, and just being miserable and trapped for like the 2 hours of the movie. And, one of the things I want to be like crystal clear on is I also recognize I don't see things the same way at 47 as I did at 15.
No. And we weren't the right age to kind of love this originally, which I think makes a big difference, because we've talked about in the past, I've talked to you about Superman 3 and, and Tron and whatever, which kind of may not be great, but they catch you at the right age. And so, you can still stick it on now and kind of go, oh, that's, get a warm glow. And I definitely don't have any feelings for this, except, wow, that's a real corporate, kind of almost like dark, cynical take on Christmas. I mean, my main problem watching these two over the last couple of days is especially in the first film. I think in the second film, I actually prefer the second film, and we can talk about that later. But I think in both films, like the problem is most of the characters are dicks. Um, and I would say in the first film, only John Candy and the old guy with the snow shovel aren't. Um, even Kevin is incredibly obnoxious for the first half of the first film. It's only the fact that you bring on two people who are trying to hurt him that kind of make him look better. And of course, and he slowly learns some lessons. Of course, I think they mellow that in the second film, quite wisely. But even in the second film, I'm like, the mom is still terrible. The dad's still hilarious. He doesn't care. He's like, in both films, he's like, oh, I'm sure it'll be okay. It's like all his family are horrible. Like everybody he comes across is a dick, like in shops or hotels or whatever. And apart from in the second film, they bring in poor old Brenda Fricker, who just won an Oscar in a pretty thankless role as the bird lady, to try to replicate the guy with a snow shovel again. But yeah, that was my main takeaway. Like all the people in this are horrible. I don't care about anybody.
So, I mean, I don't disagree. I also think this is a fairy tale aimed at an 8-year-olds, right? It's how the whole world's against you, kid. And you're just trying to get by.
No wonder if you act like that. You deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some like, were you always right, or were you a little bit of a stinker?
Yeah.
And the movie, I think, doesn't sit down and spell that out necessarily, but I also think it does a halfway decent job of setting up such a crazy fairy tale sort of world. I mean, in a very conventional way that a kid would recognize their own world if they were an incredibly wealthy Chicagoan.
I was going to say, you have to have a lot of money, and I mean, like everything kind of has to go your way, really, including coincidences and contrivances. I mean, especially by the second film. In the first film, it's kind of like I mean, I guess it's like any successful film in its sequels. The first film, I just about buy it, and by the second film, it's like, no, that would not be happening. This would not happen. That's ridiculous. First film, I get the pizza guy outside the door who's a bit of an idiot, and you can have the kind of the Tommy gun going, and he's going to run off and fall into a bush. I don't buy that Tim Curry and the woman on the desk and Rob Schneider and a couple of security guys will think they're being shot at from a hotel room. No, I don't buy that. So.
No, and I mean it's playing to the maturity and intellect of kids in both films, and I and when I was 15, that just seems stupid.
I just saw Quentin Tarantino, and he literally said the funniest thing when you're 8 years old is somebody being kicked in the nuts, and I'm like, this film is literally sums that up, I think. Because watching these back to back is a bit of an endurance test for an adult, because it's like, is Joe Pesci going to get hit on the head and fall downstairs and go again? He's already done it 50 times.
Well, the thing that surprised me because it had been 32 years since I'd seen this movie, the Home Alone 1, and I'd never seen Home Alone 2, was how little of the movie is the Daniel Stern, Joe Pesci, Wet Bandits stuff. Like, it's in there consistently to kind of get the audience primed for it, and like, don't worry, kids, these guys are actually just goofs, and and so by the time they show up, Kevin's got a lot of motivation, and but it also only lasts a few minutes. Home Alone 2 goes, no, what people liked about the first movie was the Wet Bandits, so we're going to do 30 minutes of these guys falling over and over and over. Like they
well, it's a lot more violent. I felt like watching the second one. I was like, holy shit! Like some of the stuff isn't even funny.
Yeah,
what happens to them.
Yeah, well, I also mistook the staple gun for a nail gun at first, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, I was like thinking, was it Lethal Weapon 2? Whatever. He's been decaffeinated. But it's like, yeah. I was like, this is actually like, I don't know if this is funny anymore, really. Plus, they'd be dead, obviously, in real life. Plus, the second film definitely goes further, is darker. But I mean, for me, the second film wins because I think it's a more interesting environment. It kind of does the Die Hard 3 thing, of it opens it up into New York. You got Tim Curry, which is always going to be a winner, and you've got one of the best Christmas songs ever, which they only use for about 5 seconds, ridiculously. But I mean, Darling Love, it was so good. They nicked it for Love Actually and used it in Love Actually.
Yeah.
All Alone at Christmas, fantastic. So the second one I prefer, but definitely. I mean, I respect the concept. I don't think I like how it was kind of done, the practice, really.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was simple, right? I mean, and I also didn't even watch these back to back. I had a week in between watching them. And the first time I was like, okay, this is how this actually works, like as an adult viewer. And seeing like, okay, this is really a story about this kid realizing, he can do things for himself, which he's never done before. And as the youngest son in a family, I kind of remember that of everyone kind of, you don't know how to do anything. And I'm like, well, you never let me do anything either.
Well, especially the first film, he has to overcome fears.
Yeah.
So there's the basement, there's the old guy with the shovel, and then ultimately there's the robbers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like him basically like, yeah, I can do that. Like you say, I can do this and I can do this.
Yeah, I mean, him going shopping and like talking to the cashier, about whether or not these frozen meals are going to be any good. I think the once you get over the idea of this kid is not just like sitting in his parents' closet, like, shaking and weeping, which is what probably most kids would do.
And they found his corpse a couple of days later. With the British version.
I think the movie does a fairly good job of setting it up to how in both films, how they misplace Kevin.
I liked the second one again more because I like how they teased you with that, and I bought that one more than I did the first one.
I bought the first one way more.
Oh, he did.
Mm-hmm.
He did.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm like, they would have kind of noticed he wasn't on the van. I mean, even if that other kid's like kind of climbing out the trunk or whatever and walking off, it's like they would have noticed before the airport. Whereas,
but they were in 2 different vans.
That's true.
That was kind of the thing. And they definitely did enough like, okay, how can we do this in a way that, skeptical mom and dad watching this movie aren't going to be like poking their kid and going, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And, between like, okay, well, their power went out, so they're all running around like crazy in the morning. There's too many people there. They said the head count is right, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
I could kind of buy it as far as it could go.
I mean, the second one, I just like the fact that he was at the airport. He was behind his dad.
They did a really good job of like, we're getting Kevin to the airport.
Yeah. And it's like, and they have that great bit in the van where they're like, 14, where's Kevin? Oh, I'm here. Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's like, I kind of just preferred that because he isn't home alone, really. He's just gone the wrong plane.
Yeah. Which they also set up, I think, very well. Like pre 9/11, that was not crazy. None of that was crazy.
Yeah, if you say that's my dad over there,
Yeah. And I mean, because they weren't that strict about like kids flying alone. Like if you're like, that's my parent, the stewardess, it's the middle of Christmas. They don't have time to think about this shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Yeah, I very much remember that era of flying.
This time I recognized because I was like, and I never had before, but did you recognize Ali Sheedy
Yes.
in a nothing throwaway, basically? Which makes me wonder, was she just like filming another film next door or something? Um, but that was quite funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jamie was like, "Why is that Ali Sheedy?" I was like, "John Hughes is the producer." I was like,
Yeah.
right.
And of course, John Candy, I think, was only available for a day in the first one.
Mhm.
And he was, I think he was paid like nothing or hardly anything, but he was allowed to improvise, which nobody else was allowed to go off script. So he just made up his scene basically on the spot, I think.
And I will be honest, I laughed so hard I cried at like two of his lines. And those are things he made up on the fly. The thing about leaving
Oh,
his son at the funeral,
yeah.
and then like we can't, he was 6, 8 weeks later, he was fine. Like, and no one can deliver something like John Candy. God, I miss that guy. He was so good.
Yeah. 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 And again, the only one of the few people with humanity in this film, I think,
Mm-hmm.
And the mum even treats him like shit. She's like horrible. She's so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good thing to kind of talk about is like Catherine O'Hara in these films and kind of the way they depict the parents versus the kid. Thinking of it being like a movie about like 4 8-year-old boys or 10-year-old boys.
Yeah.
And one thing that really stuck out to me was this is also like I'm used to Catherine O'Hara and like Waiting for Guffman or more recently in like Schitt's Creek and Tim Burton movies. You don't see her play relatively straight very often or even wardrobe relatively straight.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was like, she's kind of a pretty lady and a good actor. And like, I mean, like, I know she's an amazing actor, but it was like, you see her as like a human and not like Catherine O'Hara doing a bit for like the first time. And I'm glad she didn't get stuck in that rut of like being Kevin's mom.
No.
Like, because she's so talented, but it was also kind of like, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting as well that in the first film, there's a lot more cutaways to her and John Hurd, like, trying to get back and trying to get, her trying to get back to the house.
Yeah.
And in the second one, they just go, nobody cares about
that. Right. So they just show them in Florida in a motel room.
Yeah. And then she just pops up at the end again. And they're like, and I'm like, yeah, that's what we need. We don't care about like, is she halfway across the country now? No, she's still trying to get a lift and stuff,
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Well, I mean, there's a real planes, trains, and automobiles vibe to kind of what they were trying to do there. Yeah. And of course, the punchline being the family actually caught up with her after all that.
Yeah. But definitely. I mean, I will say it did kind of like prick my nostalgia. Watching this. I mean, I did go, oh, that kind of reminds me of those days, being alive at that time, and there aren't any phones, which would solve a lot of problems, and computers and stuff. But at the same time, yeah. So when I was watching both of them, though, I was thinking, I bet Ryan loves Angels with Filthy Faces, or Angels with Filthy Souls. Is it?
Yeah.
Because it's a parody of Angels with Dirty Faces, isn't it? I suppose
it is. I mean, at least in part. I will be honest. It bothers me that they didn't shoot it like a 1940s movie. It's just black and white. It's like the angles are all like Dutch angles and stuff. I'm like, that's not how any of this stuff was shot back then.
So is that from Kevin's perspective though? Because one thing I did appreciate this time, which I don't think I had before, is a lot of stuff. And not just the blatant in your face stuff, where he's looking up at people. Because there's a great shot where he's in the second one, they've kind of abducted him, and he's trying to get away from them at a crosswalk, and he's looking up and basically looking under Joe Pesci and Damon's chin. But apart from in your face stuff like that, there's actually a lot more shots from his height than you realize, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the shots of Angels with Dirty Souls. There, I mean, that's on the TV. That's just kind of the movie within a movie.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like looking at it, going like, I really appreciate what they tried to do here. They needed to back the camera up about 10 feet, and they needed to flatten the lighting.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to be that guy. Just you want to just enjoy it, and the dialogue is also stuff that like it's close, but they talk too much. It's like, no. You gotta rat-a-tat this stuff. Like, you say this, you say this, you say this, you say this. And instead he's going on this like monologue. And I'm like, you do have like one monologue like that a movie, and it's not right before you execute somebody. Which is just weird stuff to know. I know, but it was interesting to kind of see what they were trying to do and go, okay, he's a little familiar with the genre, but not that familiar with the genre.
Yeah. Well, the fact that he seems to, that's his favorite films as well. It's very hard to believe for an 8-year-old boy.
Well, it's funny because he's clearly putting it on as like something he's a little scared of. Like, he's covering his face the first time he's watching it.
Yeah.
And it's this old movie that,
well, it's the film Uncle Frank's supposed to be watching at the start, where he says Uncle Frank won't let me watch a film, and it's not even.
Oh, is that it? Yeah. Well, I mean, a 1940s era or 30s era movie would not have been violent enough to worry about, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe. So what's your favorite scene in the first one? Because the one that really stands out way above everything else is the church, where he's talking to the old guy in the church. I was like, that's John Hughes kind of firing on all the cylinders, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of stuff that.
And they so badly try to replicate that in the second one, it just doesn't work because they make it longer, but it's just not as good or powerful.
And you also know it's completely hollow in the second one.
Well, yeah, because it's almost like, well, that was your kind of choice, whereas in the first one, yeah, it was kind of a stupid argument. I mean, it kind of still.
Well, it's also like he's an 8-year-old kid. He's going to get on a plane, and he's never going to think about that. He doesn't live in New York. He's not going to take her. Like, what is happening here? Like, he gives her a Christmas ornament. Like, it's all sweet, but it's very America 1990s. Like,
he doesn't say come back to the Ritz and have like Christmas lunch. He just goes, have this ornament. Anyway, bye.
Yeah. It's like super performative, if I can use that word.
Yeah. And also his parents wouldn't have let him out of the hotel again right at the end of the film to do anything. I don't think, let alone get dressed and run off into Central Park.
No. I mean, I'm willing to accept the whole fiction of like him going up into the attic of the performance hall. Which I think is like a real performance hall in New York. I just don't know anything about it. But I
think somebody would have got rid of the homeless people coming to the attic at some point.
I think they probably would have bars across the window. Yeah, it is New York. But yeah, the my favorite scene in the first movie is probably that, or it's John Candy with Catherine O'Hara in the back of the van, which sounds dirty. It's not.
No.
But it's him trying to calm her and it not doing any good. Like, it's such a tight, like, these are two great performers improvising this thing.
Yeah.
And it just works. But you know, I have affection for, some of what they did of what does an 8-year-old do left alone in his house, eating tubs of ice cream and jumping on the bed and all that.
Well, I like the little carryovers to the second film with the fact that, he's obsessed with getting a cheese pizza of his own. And that's like a big deal. And fireworks as well, buying fireworks. So yeah, it's kind of nice. You can tell the same team. It's kind of a bit like Jaws 2, or Superman 2. You can tell the same team made the second film, which is nice because they bother with the details. So there's lots of little nods if you've kind of watched them close together, which was kind of nice.
Yeah, at the same time, I mean, it almost goes beyond that, kind of like Jaws 2. It's like We only had 2 years. This kid's going to start growing like a weed. If we're going to have another one of these, we got to crank it out. So it felt like John Hughes went to the like his final draft copy and was like, okay, search replace Chicago with New York. Okay, now that I've done that, search replace old man with old woman. Like,
well, it's also like doing the old. It's the same as Die Hard too. It's doing the old. It's in their time. It's 1 year later, but in real time, it's 2 years later.
Yeah.
Because they're like, hey, this happened to us last year. So.
Yeah,
plus it's also in that 80s thing that every fucking sequel had to do, which is like, let's go to New York in the sequel, like Gremlins 2, or Short Circuit 2, or you name it.
It was in the 30s and 40s. It was you went west, and then in the 80s it was you go to New York.
In New York,
it was almost I mean, it was absolutely.
Dundee was already in New York, but he stayed in New York,
right?
But yeah, it was like I'm surprised Jaws 2 didn't go to New York. Actually,
if they could have figured it out, they would have.
So and of course, as soon as you're in New York, insert the Donald Trump cameo.
So I read that Macaulay Culkin was trying to get that officially, like not really erase the scene.
Oh yeah, I heard this.
But he tried to get himself CGI'd in instead of Donald Trump.
Yeah, he wanted like him now
to
kind of like pass himself.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's because he wanted to get rid of Trump as well, or he just
he wanted to get rid of Trump. He was
two birds with one stone.
Yeah. And that was his like, well, what are you gonna do there? You have, and it's like, well, one, apparently for time that scene gets cut for TV all the time.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's kind of also a thing to remember when that's what Donald Trump was to the country. He was kind of this rich dude who just showed up in places, and you were always kind of like, why?
It reminded me of the Ghostbusters 2 video where like everybody turns up in that, even if they're not in the film, like Chevy Chase and Daryl Hannah. And yeah, Donald Trump's in the video. And when you watch it now, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, he shouldn't be in there. That kind of spoils it a bit, And not, and even doesn't matter what your politics are. It's just like he just doesn't fit. It feels weird,
And that's kind of how he always felt in stuff popping up. It was, and then later you found out, oh, it's because if you use any of his properties, that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
And that was he on the plaza when they filmed it.
So he's like, he's kind of doing like what Richard Branson did in that Bond film.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you can use Virgin Airways if I can walk through past Bond at one point.
Oh, I mean, he's in Superman Returns as an astronaut.
Oh, wow.
Because they're doing a Virgin Galactic something or other.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's crazy. And a very fresh-faced Rob Schneider as well.
So I found the casting of this perplexing.
Tell me why.
They underused 3 really good actors. Like I felt like the whole plot should have been him versus the hotel.
Which it kind of was, but it was cut short, wasn't it?
It was really short. And I was like, you flew in Tim Curry. Like this guy is total ace talent. He's so good. And you give him like one group goofball scene really out of the whole film. It felt oddly wasted and made me wonder if there wasn't a bunch of stuff on the cutting room floor.
Well, I mean, it's a bit like a Batman sequel, though, isn't it? Because it's like, it's almost like they had that, but then they remembered they had to use Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. So they were like, well, we've got to have 30 minutes of them at the end of the film. So we've really got to kind of close down and finish off this hotel stuff.
Yeah, and I wondered if there wasn't a draft at some point where they were doing something in the hotel instead, like trying to heist something in the hotel. And it just turns into this weird thing of, oh, there's this empty $3 million mansion that Kevin's going to utterly destroy.
Well, yeah, I'd kind of forgotten it a little bit. And I'm like, so is all this going to happen in the toy store? a bit like I think one of the Chucky films might finish like that.
Mhm.
I mean, or maybe I'm mixing that with like the warehouse or the factory, but it's like, and then I'm like, oh no, he actually gets them to chase him back to his uncle's house, which he's conveniently rigged up because it's like an empty house with loads of tools laying around.
Yeah.
Loads of tools, loads of toxic substances to use, which I don't think would have been left there quite as easy to get hold of. So yes, that was kind of funny.
Well, and it's brownstone off Central Park.
Yeah,
Like the value of that place that he's just like
blown up.
utterly fucking up. And then Catherine O'Hara runs to the front door, and I was like, the scene that should have happened was her getting shot in the ass with a staple gun here. Like, there's no way she gets off that front stoop with that staple in the ass.
Nail gun.
Right.
I mean, I actually felt a bit sorry for Tim Curry when she slapped him. I'm like, he's kind of a dick, but she's so much worse. He doesn't deserve that. It's your fucking fault that you lost your kid again for the second year.
Yeah.
And you're having to go with this dude who basically has been trying to catch this kid for credit card fraud, which he is doing, really.
Yeah, they do this. We talked earlier about, I went off about Catherine O'Hara's like stunning blue eyes or whatever, but the thing that's interesting to me about motherhood in this is it's the mom who can't deal with the scenario she has created with Christmas.
Yeah.
And I will be totally honest, man. Like, I think I've talked about it in other podcasts. Like, I found a video of myself in 7th grade. I was behind the camera, and I'm trying to talk to my mom during Christmas when the whole family's there. And you can just see how tired and worn out she is. And her yelling at me all the time during Christmas suddenly made sense.
Yeah.
Like, I used to think like she just hated Christmas or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there's just too much. It's just all too much. And Kevin can't interpret what's going on. He just says Uncle Frank sucks, and his cousin pisses the bed, and all this stuff. And Buzz is just an asshole. And believe me, when Buzz was doing the thing where he was like doing the court thing, I was like,
yeah.
Oh my God, could I remember that from being a little brother as a kid, of like the older brother being like, let me lay this all out for you why the younger brother's a complete dipshit.
I'm like, what are the parents doing here? They saw what he was doing on stage.
Dude, I am here to tell you that was my youth.
Yeah.
My brother would absolutely do shit. I would react, and I was in trouble because I reacted.
Yeah, that's not cool.
It's every little brother's story, though. I mean,
yeah.
And
but that felt more realistic to me than the first film. To me,
absolutely. The first film, I wouldn't have done anything on stage. I would have tackled my brother in the middle of dinner. Absolutely. That was. And maybe this is an American versus English thing or something, but the mom like going, you know what, you're such a pain in the ass. You're locked away now. You're in timeout. It all felt very real in the first movie. In the second movie, I was like, lady, you got to learn. No lessons were learned from the first movie, apparently.
Yeah, you're still sending him up to the third floor or whatever.
Yeah, and it's like you think he's not going to. Anyway, I felt like if the second movie really had any big weaknesses, I mean, it had several, but one of them was no lessons were learned from the first movie by anyone in the family.
No, not really. They almost like slipped back to where they were previously. Because it kind of made me laugh as an adult when they all come back, and I think at the end of the first one, Buzz kind of goes, "Oh yeah. Well, I'm giving you respect because, and they don't know about the robbers or anything, but it's just the fact that he hasn't burnt the house down, basically. Yeah. And the second one is like, well, I'm giving you respect again because we've had a shitload of free stuff delivered and we don't know why. Yeah. But we're just going to open it all anyway. We're not going to say where did this come from before you touched it,
Yeah, it was very 90s in that.
Isn't it just a bunch of toys? So the adults aren't going to be happy. They're not
Yeah,
going
it
to
was all coming from the toy store. I don't know what the adults were going to get.
Yeah.
But I also had a hard time believing that this incredibly wealthy family that apparently is multi-generationally wealthy, by like where the brother lives and where, their mansion in like Evanston,
Yeah.
is going to some like motel in Florida for the holidays. Like that, not like
Yeah.
back then you would have gone to a travel agent and been like, okay, what can I do?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the first one seemed a bit more realistic with the hotel in Paris, was it?
yeah. Well, they were going to visit that same brothers, the New York brothers,
Yeah.
place in Paris. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the second one, I don't know if it's because there was a storm, but were they relocated or did they just get a place closer to the airport?
The motel.
Yeah.
There's a line that suggests that Uncle Frank picked it out because that's where he and his wife had honeymooned.
Okay. I missed that. Because
Yeah.
it was a really shitty hotel.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, well, you like, if nothing else, you don't go to South Florida in the middle of winter. Like,
It's funny though, because I was thinking when I went to Florida, it was right after a massive tornado. So I'm like, that's kind of realistic. It's like you kind of go expecting a great place, and there's like boats and trees and stuff,
yeah,
and like all the houses are smashed up, and you're like, it's terrible. It's like I'm not, you spend a week like dodging fallen trees. So yeah, so that kind of made me laugh a bit. I also laughed. I did like the line about where he kind of gives Rob Schneider the gum, and he goes, "There's plenty more where that came from." For the tip,
yeah,
that was a good one that kept going. And there was a great cut actually in the second one as well from I think the Grinch cartoon on TV to Tim Curry.
yeah. That was amazing.
That was fantastic. That really stood out. What do you think of Brenda Fricker as the lovely bird lady? I just feel sorry for the actress. I feel like this is what Hollywood does to good actors.
Same. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it takes a great actress from a little foreign film, British film, and it goes, what can we do with them? They can play a homeless bird lady in Home Alone 2. But she probably got a lot of money, so that's something. And then we never saw her again in anything else. At least not American.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, she was the feed the birds, tuppence a bag lady from Mary Poppins. I mean, they basically imported that character to this movie for some reason.
Yeah. See, I could buy the snow shovel guy falling out with his son and being sad that he hasn't talked to his granddaughter for 20 years or whatever. But I can't buy her going, I had a bad relationship, so I decided to live rough in the park.
I do feel like that was a version you would tell a small child of, like, there was abuse and alcohol and drugs and but I was also like, but this isn't that movie. That's literally what happened to that lady.
It's like we have to fill that in ourselves, which probably isn't a good thing if we have to start rewriting the script ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, the thing of the, like, I got, the really, let me simplify what happened to an 8-year-old of, like, I got into a fight with my son. We haven't talked since.
Yeah.
Is actually the bare essence of probably what really happened. Like, whether it's about like something with a family will or his mother or whatever the case was.
Yeah.
That was the essence of what really happened. And it felt really painfully honest. Like that guy, whoever he was, the actor, like, killed that scene.
Well, also the fact that they'd set him up as, this scary character, and all the kids were kind of bullshitting about, oh, we killed his entire family and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And then when Kevin finally meets him, once he gets over that initial fear, he's like, actually, maybe I can help him. Maybe I'm going to give you my point of view, which is like, isn't it a bit stupid that you haven't talked to this person? Because, you could at least try, and the worst that's going to happen is they won't want to talk to you, but at least you'll know,
Yeah, I mean, And the guy says, like, well, it's scary. Like it was an incredibly well done, like, John Hughes, when he's, as you said, firing on all cylinders, like this is it.
Yeah.
It felt painfully real for like this goofy movie that then spins off into like, hitting people with paint cans 5 minutes later. I don't want it to not be able to do those things.
Yeah.
But I was saying to Simon before we started recording, like, look, I'm supposed to watch this movie with my nephew here between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't know how to navigate that scene with a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Like if he gets upset during that scene, I'm gonna just be like, power through, kid, because we're about to get to the nut crunch, and it's
yeah,
it's I think it's really
in the face. Man.
Yeah, but I mean, kids also do see adults going through things, and it's kind of interesting to see the kid not like running away or having some cartoonish resolution to the guy's problem. All he does is talk to him, so.
Yeah. Because I mean, they do have the scene where you do see him with his family, so and he kind of waves at him. But I mean, it could have pretty much finished with him just like, well, that's all I got, and him walking off, and like, well, thank you, I'll think about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, but of course he wants to tie it up with a nice bow, the same as, he runs out on Christmas morning to see Brenda Fricker.
Yeah.
Who's having a great time with her bird. She's enjoying herself. She's not like cold.
Nothing like sleeping in the snow covered in pigeon shit.
With no food. But yeah, no, it's kind of like, I mean, they definitely are very corporate Hollywood in the fact that they are precision designed to make money, these films.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, they lose a bit of humanity. But I think definitely John Hughes writing it and Chris Columbus directing it gives it as much as you can get out of this concept. Like I say, I personally prefer the second movie, even though I kind of respect the kind of clean through line of the first film. But I prefer the second one because I think there's more stuff going on.
Yeah.
Enjoyable. And again, I'm just going to say "Darling Love."
Yeah,
fantastic song. I can't believe they had that song and then they used it for 3 seconds when he's in a taxi.
I can't believe they didn't pull in "Darling Love." Like, she lives in New York.
Well, you've seen the video, right?
Yeah,
you've seen the video where it's Macaulay Culkin, probably a couple of years older, looking a couple of years older than the movie, where he's like, and actually looking and acting like a real dick, where he's like in a recording studio and he's basically the producer. And like Darlene Love and her band are there, and they're like, "Are you ready, Mac?" He's like, "Go for it." And of course, they're performing, and he's just like messing around, like he's pressing buttons. But there's way more interaction in that than there is in the film. But that was a very 80s thing, wasn't it? You kind of tagged a successful song just on the end of the film, and most people had left the theater by then. At least we got the song, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I did I enjoy watching these? That's an interesting question because they certainly, like I say, they took me back, which was nice in a nostalgic way. But I don't have any compunction to reach for these again anytime soon. I mean,
we're too old to be nostalgic for these movies. Full stop.
No, you're right. I mean, and that's probably why I watch Die Hard and Gremlins every year because they had a much bigger impact on me. Because when I saw them, I was 8.
Yeah.
When I saw this, I was 16 and didn't care.
Yeah.
The first one and the second one, I was 18, 19, so I definitely didn't care. Now I go. It's nice seeing Tim Curry in his prime. And it's funny seeing a very young Rob Schneider, but I don't really care.
Yeah, I enjoyed I enjoyed not hating the first one watching it this time. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
The second one weirdly played for me very much how I remembered the first one playing for me when I was 15, which was, this is really thin. It
Yeah.
has a lot of violence.
Yeah.
I am just the story of the family leaving the kid kind of works, but it's still kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I don't dislike these movies the way I thought I did coming
No.
at them. What I
There is
would
there is so much worse out
Oh my
there.
God. Yeah. I mean the sequels and all the spin-offs and knockoffs and
Yeah.
I
I mean, at least this is an A grade production. At least this is everybody going, we're gonna well, I mean, and actually something we haven't mentioned, which actually elevates it massively. John Williams.
yes.
Um, which, you're so used to John Williams just being with Spielberg that you kind of forget that he does stuff like Harry Potter and these two movies. Where, to be honest, one thing I do every kind of like Christmas is I do have the soundtracks that I listen to for both movies because they're
Okay.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'm not just talking about the songs, like Tom Petty and Darlene Love. I'm talking about just John Williams, because his Christmas stuff is fantastic, and it's way better than the films deserve, to be honest.
Yeah, the score can always elevate a movie. I was just watching a film that was Jerry Goldsmith's second score, and they were talking about like on TCM, they were talking about yeah, this basically takes this from being like a Poverty Row, embarrassment to like, oh, this actually seems like a legitimate film while you're watching it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen that. We've seen that a million times. I mean, just the Superman theme, or Star Wars, or Jaws. I mean, how much does that add to the films?
Oh yeah.
And I feel like, okay, that this isn't quite that level, but it's still like an amazing polish on top.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. This was number one. The first Home Alone was number one for 12 weeks. It was still in the top 10 at the end of April the next year. Think about that. Think about that these days.
Yeah.
You still had a Christmas film in the top 10 at the start of May the next year.
Yeah, people just kept going to see this thing, man. It was bananas.
Yeah. I mean, this was like a license to print money, really. So yeah, I mean, definitely. And I've got friends, our age who they have kids now, who were like probably like 8, 9, 10 years old, who watch this and love it. Mm-hmm. So it's still working. It's still working. You just have to be in that age range, I think.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with that.
One of the things I want to look at as we go through each movie this Christmas is I want to ask the question and because I think we talked about it a bit, not you and I, but last Christmas we did a movie called Santa with Muscles.
Okay.
And if you haven't listened to that podcast, I encourage you to do so.
That. I think I blanked it.
Yeah, it was me and my brother-in-law drank a bunch and then watched a Hulk Hogan Christmas movie and then talked about it. So what one of the things I brought up in that was, does Hollywood hate Christmas? Because it sure feels like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about stuff that you and I have seen together, or like talks about like Krampus, mm-hmm. or even like National Vacations, Christmas, Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is like, this is an endurance test to get through, this time of year.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing that the thing that Hollywood thinks we want to see on Christmas is people hating Christmas. And
is it though, or is it so that they can be redeemed at the end of the film?
I think it's a bit of both, because it's the wish fulfillment of what we wish we would get for enduring the crazy aunts and uncles and too many people in the house. And
I mean, you have to say, with both Home Alones though, Kevin's the champion for Christmas, because he's actually the one all the way through saying, look, you're not doing this properly. You're not respecting Christmas. You got to have a tree. Like, he's obsessed with a tree. And I think in the first film, his mum goes, you know, well, kind of like actually, or maybe the second one. It's like she goes like, well, you know, we'll decorate a palm tree, and he's like, it's not the same. You need a Christmas tree.
And
So
she's like, "Oh, you and your Christmas trees." I'm like, "He is 8, madam."
yeah, yeah, and and that's actually helps her find him later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like so he's actually the one that goes, look, you need to do this properly and kind of respect the tradition, whereas the rest
Yeah.
of the family just don't care.
I don't think this movie hates Christmas. I think it does
They
play
hate the
with
family. They hate families.
right. I think it definitely plays with how stressful the holidays are and how crazy, how we drive ourselves crazy. But
Yeah,
I think at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not sure like, hitting, thieves in the nuts with a bowling ball is necessarily what Christmas is all about. But I do think you're right. Like
better stop
Kevin's just
doing
trying
that.
to keep Christmas. And even when he's in New York, he's
Yeah,
like, hey, this charity, for this hospital is what it's all about. And that's
yeah,
his motivation for the third act.
yeah. He almost goes a bit kind of Bruce Willis at the end. He's like, "You don't mess with kids at Christmas," you know. It's like,
Right. Yeah, he could have just gone and like hung out in the hotel or waited,
yeah.
his worst case scenario if Tim Curry kept a hand on him was he's going to hang out at the plaza till someone comes and gets him.
Well, that's the difference, isn't it? Because the first film he has to kind of fight. It's like Rocky. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Rocky. Isn't it? First film he has to fight, whereas in the second one he goes looking for the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I mean, I guess that's some kind of growth, but yeah, he knows he has to right a wrong.
Yeah. And and when he's by himself in Chicago, he goes and he sets up his own Christmas tree, and
Yeah,
he thinks his Christmas wish is that his family vanished. He has no idea where they are. Like, right?
no,
He wakes up
no.
and they're just Omega Man, and it's a little weird that that's not investigated a little bit more. But he's gonna deal. He got his Christmas wish.
Well, I mean, part of me is also in the first film. Why don't you just go? Because all the neighbors can't be away. So why don't you just go like a couple of houses down and go, look, I think I made my family disappear. What can you help me?
I think they were trying to say like maybe eventually that was going to happen, but
Yeah,
he was going to do this like no one believes I can do anything on my own. Now I am in fact on my own,
yeah.
and
So I'm gonna
I'm gonna prove
shave.
that that's okay. Even though it's like, well, yeah, you got to keep the lights on, kid.
Yeah.
You're gonna go get a job, but. I do think that at least they do enough to be like, hey, he's gonna do his little Christmas dinner by himself. He's gonna set up the tree. He's gonna go to the church and hear the choir.
Yeah.
Like he does try and keep Christmas. And I
There's also
don't think all movies do that.
there's also a great line. I can't remember if it's in the first one or the second one where he kind of goes, "We all wish we were by ourselves, but doing stuff by yourself isn't as fun. Even if people annoy you, it's always nicer having people around." And I
Yeah,
think that's a very good point, even for adults. I think that's a very good point.
yeah,
It's like it is kind of nice the thought of being by yourself, but the reality is actually you kind of have to compromise and put up with stuff and work with people for a better life, really.
hmm
Yeah,
yeah. One of the scenes I also liked in the first one was when he goes and tracks down the Santa in the like park area.
which apparently was supposed to be Chris Farley auditioned for that, but didn't get it. But yeah, that was I could kind of see that could be like a nice little cameo for somebody actually.
Yeah.
But the guy who actually does it kind of pulls it off really well.
Yeah, it's a nice little bit, and his like, hey, can you pass this message, and all that stuff. I thought that was kind of sweet. He's trying to do Christmas right, even though he's just by himself.
And
But
Santa's
anyway,
like, have a breath, my kid. So,
right, have some Tic Tacs.
Santa's got places to go. Yeah, that's good. That's good. No, yeah, there was. I mean, there's good stuff in these films. I just feel like you said, they're just very cynical. I mean, cynical on two levels. There's we've built this to make money, Which, I mean, to a certain extent, all films are made for that, right? Obviously, it's a business, right? But this one feels like particularly made to, make money. But then on the other level, it's like you say, what's it saying anyway about Christmas? Well, it's saying it's like a huge hassle.
Yeah.
And it's not much fun. And, it's almost like this thing to get through, is this big endurance test to get through.
Yeah.
Well, but then, you've got Macaulay Culkin kind of saying, no, maybe you've forgotten the meaning of it,
Yeah.
Although it's kind of a weird kind of backhanded thing, because I think he's kind of so annoying and obnoxious to start off with. He's got a lot of ground to pull back.
Yeah.
That's why I think in the second one they kind of mellowed him, so he's not as annoying. And I think he hits the ground running a lot better in the second one.
It also makes the parents and how they react to him seem worse.
Yeah. Like you say, they haven't learned anything.
Yeah, they haven't learned anything. He is not really being that unreasonable at any point in the second one.
No.
So yeah.
But we've all been, like you said, though. Maybe that's good, because we've all been in those situations where, your brother kicks you under the table, and you shout something or swear, and then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So hey, maybe they're right. But like I say, I enjoyed watching them, but I definitely not. Definitely. I mean, I definitely will watch them again at some point. But I think without having an 8-year-old handy, I'm not necessarily in a rush to kind of reach for them.
Yeah, and like I said, I have to now. I mid movie texted my brother and was like, "Oh, you should show this to your son."
Yeah,
and it somehow became, we're going to dump him off at your house and you're going to show this movie to him. So I haven't seen it in 30 whatever years, but I'm going to see it twice this year. So,
well, maybe you could add a little addendum to this, just saying, like, I sat with a 7-year-old and they said this at the end of it.
I might do a mini podcast with him. I'll ask my brother if that's okay, because that kid can talk. It'll be good. Anyway, well, y'all, thanks so much. And Simon, thanks for getting me to watch these again. I at least will know what the hell people are talking about. I know what a talk boy is now.
Yeah.
Which I apparently did in fact spike sales on the talk boy.
And all those T-shirts you can still buy these days with "Merry Christmas, you filthy animal" on.
Yeah, I had no memory of any of that. I knew it was a thing from the movie because of the T-shirts, but I don't know what they were talking about.
It's up there with Yippee-ki-yay. Or Welcome to the Party, Pal. It's up there with
right
phrases.
So y'all stick with us. We're going to do a bunch of other films throughout the holiday season. And I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but we're going to dump a bunch out. So Simon, thanks for kicking it off for everybody. And Simon and I are going to actually hang out during Christmas and do another podcast or two. So after Christmas, he and I will be back.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us.
If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.